Hello everybody, how is it going? Now, because I suffered with severe chronic OCD at 18 years old, that is when it became chronic. OCD was mild, it was definitely there throughout my teenage years. I could definitely detect compulsions looking back now. I was always quite an anxious teenager. There was avoidance, there were sort of mental neutralization of thoughts and sort of holding myself at such ridiculous standards with perfectionism and so on. Lots of guilt and just around any kind of mistake. So OCD was there at a young age, but because it got chronic when I was sort of 18, pretty much on my 18th birthday, that's when it became, well, went from mild to chronic, almost like a snap. It felt like my brain had snapped. It felt like something had broken in my brain in that nervous breakdown, that mental breakdown that I had back in 2018 that sort of started all this OCD suffering. But the problem with that, as suffering such a young age, is that I thought I could just outgrow OCD. I thought that just one day I'd be able to grow out of OCD suffering, and I'll be able to be calm with clarity, and be in mental peace through maturity and wisdom and experience. And I used to envision, when I was 25, 26 years old, and think, yeah, when I'm 25, I'll be calm. I'll be over this because this is just a phase. This is just high anxiety. If I just sort of wear it as best as I can and just wing it, and then one day it will fade and I'll just go back to what I was like. And yeah, I still got my mid-20s, that's fine. No. To say it in the most uncertain terms possible, or to make no uncertain terms around this, that's bullshit. Okay, that's nonsense. Okay, that is not the reality. OCD doesn't budge. It doesn't just go like a cold. We can often feel like, oh, it'll pass on its own. No, it's stubborn. It's resilient. It's relentless. It won't just pass. It won't just back down. It locks in there. It doesn't budge. Okay, until we start putting in the work with the persistence of the belief work, consistency with the reading, changing our behaviors, working on our life structure, and just making philosophical changes throughout life, whether that's to ourselves, changing how we view ourselves with unconditional self-acceptance, other people, how you're viewing others. Are you applying compassion? Just sort of your philosophical view on others, your intellectual view on others, breaking down other people's views and behaviors and actions, and just sort of seeing it through a different lens rather than being super rigid, rather than being super black and white. And your life philosophy as well, how you view life, how you view hardships, how you view adversities, how you view hassles, how you view problems, how you deal with problems, the tolerance. How's your tolerance towards discomfort? How's your tolerance towards frustration? What are you like with dealing with setbacks and relapses just in life, on this journey of life that we're on? How you view things going wrong. Are you whinging? Are you complaining? Are you whining? Are you quite pessimistic? Or are you hopeful? Are you optimistic? Just how we view life, just our views on life, our outlook on life, our philosophies on life. That's all going to need an adjustment. It's all going to need a shake-up. It's all going to need realigning. It's all going to need assessing and evaluating and think, right, that isn't healthy for me. Well, that doesn't get me very far. Well, that got me into a state of emotional despair. Well, that kind of belief, well, that perspective got me into emotional misery. So therefore, I ought to change that in order for better emotional results. Now, what people will often say is that, oh, one day I'll outgrow this and then I'll go back to my old self. Wrong. You won't outgrow anything and you won't go back to your old self. Always remember this. Your old self got you into this predicament. Your old self got you into this state, into this mess, shall we say. That sounds a bit mean, but your old state got you into this emotional misery. It got you into this suffering, into this struggle. Yes, you didn't just go, oh, I'm going to have OCD. No, but your old self, as in your behaviors, your beliefs, your structure, your procrastination, your avoidance, all these habits that are built to this, that's due to your old self engaging with that, partaking in that, developing these beliefs, these conditional beliefs, the beliefs that you hold in a rigid fashion. That's all built up to where we are today. And OCD has just become chronic. It was laying dormant, and then due to genetic reasons, it's there in your brain, in the brain wiring, and it's pounced. and it's maybe a life stress has triggered it, maybe a traumatic experience, maybe it's just luck of the draw, the luck of the genetic draw, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna latch. For me, it latched when I was 18, on a holiday. The day before a holiday, I felt like, oh God, the mild turned to chronic, because all of a sudden it wasn't just lingering in the background, it wasn't just simmering away, it wasn't just boiling in the background, it felt like a complete explosion. It felt like I just couldn't function. I felt dysfunctional. I felt almost quite paralyzed by sort of the mental rumination and the exhaustion, and was very fatigued and just weighed down by the solving, the analysis, the rumination, the thoughts, bombardment, the harassment of intrusive thoughts, and that was almost like a switch for me. So, but it's not like I decided to have it on my 18th birthday. What's happened there is that over time, if it didn't do on the 18th birthday, I'm sure it would have been my 20th, or it would have been later on. It just would have latched to then. So it's not like I've just brought on OCD myself, but the behaviors, the beliefs, the life structure has allowed OCD to pounce. And I'm very thankful, by the way, that OCD has latched at such a young age, because it allowed me to put in the work, change things philosophically, change things behaviorally, and it's taught me so much. Just how I deal with problems today, my outlook, my gratitude, my tolerance towards frustration and discomfort, hardships, dealing with problems, not complaining. It's a zero return investment. Just sort of that mental flexibility that I have with just overcoming hassles and problems, and the determination to get things done. And because I've had that taken away at such a young age, now that I've got that calmness and a good solid mental health now, because it was taken away, now I've got it again, my life feels much more enriching. I feel much more empowered because I've had that suffering taken away. It's like if I took your vision away for 5 years and then gave it back to you 5 years later, it would feel amazing just to be able to see again. Wow, I can see again. This is incredible. It's a bit like that. When you've had that inner turmoil, that inner chaos, that inner frantic state with OCD, where it's just that constant on guard, and that being sort of, you're swamped by anxiety, guilt, shame, depression. You're swamped by all those uncomfortable emotions, and that is your 24/7 daily life for the foreseeable. For me, it was for years. And that was my life for a long time. Now, overcoming that and recovering doesn't just feel like you go back to your old self. No way. It's like a life overhaul. It's like a factory reset, where you get this new lease of life, and you feel very free. You feel much more mental energy and mental clarity, and you just have that buzz, and life feels a lot brighter. And yes, you still have problems, you still have frustration, you still have hassles, of course. I'm a human being trying to navigate my way through life with 8 billion other people, with all the things that could go wrong. Life's bloody difficult. But it's because I've had the mental health taken away, and I've had a more enriching one that I've gained from my experience of OCD and overcoming obsessive compulsive disorder. It's allowed me to fully thrive and flourish in the life that I've got. And that's only come from suffering. But going back to my initial point of this video, is that please don't wait for OCD to pass. It's going to require real grit and real determination. It's going to require real effort and input from you, okay? With the disputing the irrational beliefs, the consistency with the reading, the getting your beliefs down on paper, diagnosing the problem. What's the problem? Why am I emotionally disturbed? Why am I in this state of distress? What's going wrong? Right, there's the fear. My beliefs are so rigid, they're so irrational. I'm breaking it down in coaching calls with one of the coaches here. I can see that that's the problem. I'm going to change that to a rational belief. I won't believe it yet, of course, but I'm going to try and see how my irrational thinking is causing my emotional disturbance, and my rational thinking is going to improve my emotional reaction. So I'm no longer chronically disturbed, no longer chronically depressed, no longer wallowing in guilt and shame, no longer getting bombarded by chronic anxiety, no longer drowning in the panic sensations and so on, where it feels like you're on the verge of crying, on the verge of panicking and so on. But that isn't a quick fix. But you're going to have to put in the work there. You're going to have to make the active change to your philosophies, to your behaviors. You're going to have to make and put in some input in order to see long-lasting change. And the biggest thing as a coach, and the biggest frustration as a coach is talking about the time element, the patience required, right? Because what tends to happen is that people will come in and they'll see that where the problem is. They go, okay, I can see that I have very rigid beliefs around this particular fear. Okay, that needs changing. And they'll attempt to make a change. So maybe they read the first book on the reading list. Great, well done. But then it's like, well, why aren't I seeing results yet? Well, to see long-lasting, sustainable, effective change in how we think and how we feel and how we behave, that ain't going to happen over a couple of days or a couple of weeks, even a couple of months. You can see great progress in months, definitely. I see that firsthand as a coach. But you're not going to get to long-term robust recovery with a couple of months half-hearted work. You're going to have to really see this as like a priority. Make this a project. Is there anything more rewarding than overcoming poor mental health, such as dealing with OCD, and overcoming that and living life on your terms and no longer being chained by the shackles of fear, no longer being boxed in that mental prison of OCD, no longer being avoidant, no longer allowing OCD to call all the shots to our lives. There's nothing more rewarding in that from a mental health standpoint. Okay, so the reward is there. It's there for you. You live in the greatest time to have OCD. Right? You live in the greatest era to have OCD. Why? Well, imagine somebody 100 years ago. They wouldn't be so fortunate. Imagine living in a time where they didn't even know what OCD was, right? And you would have been very frowned upon if you spoke about your thoughts and what was going on in your mind, let alone find somebody else with OCD, and let alone find somebody that understands OCD, let alone find somebody that has a proven effective method to get better from OCD, and let alone know the tools to sustain the recovery. So you live in the greatest period to have OCD. So don't turn your nose up at the opportunity to get better. It will not pass like a cold. That's what I found very difficult as well, because people that didn't necessarily understand OCD, it was more just rest up. Not like, I'm not talking sort of experts or like psychologists. I'm just talking about people that maybe I was working at my previous job, and it would be like, oh, I can tell you're panicked, I can tell you're anxious, go home, rest up, come back tomorrow. Well, the problem is OCD doesn't work like that, because with me personally, if I went home and rested up, I'd feel even worse, because I'm going in that avoidance. I'm trying to avoid the world, but then OCD is just completely winning and calling all the shots there. So it's not one of those disorders that you can just rest up and come back from. You're gonna have to put in the work, okay? You're gonna have to really see where you're going wrong and see it as a project to get absorbed by the challenge of overcoming this. But it's going to be bumpy, it's going to be turbulent, there's going to be lots of anxiety involved, and this is where the grit and determination has to come in to get better. Okay, but there's nothing more rewarding, there's nothing more freeing, and there's nothing more liberating than overcoming obsessive compulsive disorder, because you've had that good, stable, solid mental health taken it away. It's been snatched away from you. So when you start getting it back, and not just getting it back to what you were, you start really thriving and seeing life in a much different way, through a different lens, for a much more compassionate lens, for a much more self-accepting lens, self-forgiving lens, to a much more rational, flexible lens. And that allows you to enjoy life much more, and really thrive and flourish and not be boxed in by fear anymore. And you really can get there, guys. It's not a case where recovery is reserved for a select few. You're probably watching this video thinking, fucking hell, Sam, like, how do I get there? This is so hard. It is hard. Trust me, it is so hard. It's the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in my life, OCD recovery. Because it takes real bravery, it takes real courage. You're going into the wilderness at times, you're going into foreign territory when you're like, wait, I've got to drop control, I've got to just allow any thought to be there, I've got to allow any sensation to be there. What, you're telling me that the control is compulsive? You're telling me that I have to stop avoiding? You're telling me that I've got to break down these fears? You've got to tell me I've got to break down my worst case scenario? What? You're having a laugh, aren't you? It's scary. It takes real bravery and courage, but it's so worth it. And freedom does await, and your future self is urging you on. Your future self is cheering you on to put in the work today, and don't turn your nose up at the chance of recovery. Don't put that pressure on to get better, but you do need that healthy level of urgency to put in the work, because life isn't guaranteed. It could be snatched away from you at any moment. So don't just waste that opportunity to get better. Okay, it will take time, it will take patience, it will take persistence, but my God, is it worth it when you can get to a level of recovery and start living life on your terms again? And you can get there. You really, really can. It won't just budge. It won't move because you want it to. It will not pass like the common cold. It's going to require input from you, but once you start building momentum and gathering pace on the recovery journey, you really can start making strides and start seeing real progress. It's going to take work. Don't just allow OCD recovery to land on your lap. You've got to go out there, put in the work, see what happens, and then recovery starts coming to you. But right now, if you're early on in your journey, you can't just wait for it to arrive and then you're recovered. You can't outgrow OCD. You can't just get over OCD with time. No, I'm afraid. And even if it did back down slightly, it would only lay dormant and it would pounce at another time and maybe come back in your later years. Okay, you can get over it once and for all. It's going to take big changes, both philosophically and behaviorally and life structurally, but you really can get there. If you are interested in one-to-one coaching calls, and we can certainly assist you with this and guide you to the path of recovery, please email phil@ocdrecovery.com. That's phil@ocdrecovery.com. His WhatsApp number is also in the description of this video, and bombard him with every message that you've got, and he'll be very thankful for that. Anyway, guys, you take care, look after yourself, and you can get there. You really, really can. Bye-bye.